Everyone in the small town of Alderwood knew Meredith Blake. She was elegant, eccentric, and always a little mysterious. But the most curious thing about her wasn't the bright red lipstick she wore to the grocery store, or the peculiar way she spoke to her roses. It was her husband. No one had ever seen him. Meredith had moved into the old Whitmore House 3 years ago, and from the moment she arrived, she spoke often of Harrison, her charming, well-traveled husband who loved jazz records and hated pickles. She'd mention how he'd been in Prague last month for business, how he always forgot their anniversary but made up for it with violin serenades, how he once painted her portrait in oils and insisted it was better than the Mona Lisa. Yet in all that time, no one, not the mailman, not her neighbors, not even the local pastor, had ever laid eyes on Harrison Blake. Naturally, rumors blossomed. Maybe she made him up to ward off loneliness, Mrs. Callahan whispered at book club. I heard he's a secret agent, speculated young Jonah from next door. No, chimed in the pharmacist. She probably just talks to his ghost. One fall evening, the town's curiosity boiled over. Meredith hosted a dinner party, a welcome home for Harrison, she said. Invitations went out. The guest list was short, exclusive. People buzzed. The night of the party, the Whitmore House glowed with amber lights and music floated through the open windows. Inside, Meredith was radiant in a green velvet dress, toasting to her husband's return. But when the guests arrived, they found only Meredith. Harrison's upstairs getting ready, she explained. He's quite the perfectionist with his bow tie. The evening went on. Courses were served. Wine poured, laughter bloomed. But no Harrison. At last, someone dared to ask, Meredith, is Harrison real? She smiled almost sadly and leaned in. Of course he is. Just because you haven't seen him doesn't mean he doesn't exist. That night, people left unconvinced, whispering behind cupped hands. The legend of the imaginary husband deepened, but then something happened. 3 weeks later, during a quiet Tuesday morning, the town square buzzed again. A tall man with silver-streaked hair walked into the post office asking for a package addressed to Harrison Blake. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a rolled-up oil painting under one arm. The postmaster, stunned, blinked. You're real? Harrison Blake chuckled. Last I checked. And just like that, Alderwood's favorite ghost became flesh. Turns out he was indeed a travel writer, gone for long stretches, publishing under a pen name, mostly off-grid. As time passed, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Well, as ordinary as life could be in Alderwood after the sudden materialization of Harrison Blake. He became something of a local treasure. He joined the library board, shared travel stories at the cafe, even played piano at the community center on Thursday nights. Though reserved, Harrison was warm with the kind of sorrow in his eyes that made you think he'd lived 1,000 lifetimes. But as months passed, people started to notice something strange. Harrison was always alone, but never with Meredith. When asked where she was, he always had a soft, vague answer. She's resting today. The Whitmore House, once bright with music and garden parties, grew quieter. Curtains stayed drawn, flowers in the yard withered. Neighbors began to murmur again, but this time with unease, not amusement. One evening, young Jonah, now braver and older, wandered too close to the house. Peering through the crack of the heavy drapes, he swore he saw Harrison dining alone at a long table set for two. Across from him sat an empty chair and a single red rose placed where a plate should have been. Word spread. Then, one misty morning, the truth came spilling out like a secret too heavy to carry. Harrison visited the local records office requesting a copy of a death certificate. The clerk, a curious soul, couldn't help but glance at the name. Meredith Elise Blake, date of death. March 12th, 3 years ago. Cause, car accident, rainstorm. Lost control on Route 19. He stood there silently for a moment, the document trembling in his hands. Then he said, She was waiting for me to come home. The town went cold, but when they pieced it together, everything made eerie sense. Meredith had arrived at the Whitmore House just days after the accident. No moving trucks, no family, just her and her stories about Harrison, the husband who never came home because he wasn't there when she died. They had made plans to move to Alderwood together. It was their fresh start. She drove ahead, eager to set up their new life. He was meant to follow, but business delayed him overseas. And by the time he landed back in the States, she was gone. But somehow she lingered. They say grief leaves cracks in the world and sometimes love slips through. The people of Alderwood, once skeptics, now believers, began to speak of her not with suspicion, but with reverence. Some swore they still saw her tending her roses at dawn. Others claimed her favorite green velvet dress sometimes fluttered in the window. And Harrison, he stayed. He lived alone in the Whitmore house, quietly, gracefully. Every day he left the porch light on. Every Sunday he set a second teacup at the table. Every night he kissed the air and whispered, "Good night, my love." Not imaginary, not forgotten, just not quite here anymore. And Alderwood never questioned love again.